All right, in today's episode, we are talking NFL power rankings and my ranking of the NFL quarterbacks so far this season. You're listening to You Don't Know Jack. We just had some train go by or whatever that was. Welcome back, guys. Jackson James here with you. It's been a minute since our last episode. I really haven't actually covered the NFL since the season started, which is just crazy. I felt, that I need to get back out here and let the people know what's up, right? You guys don't know Jack. I've seen tons of rankings. We have the quarterback rankings and also my power rankings. I've done power rankings really since a while ago. If you go back on the channel, you see like my lightning list or whatever it was called. And that was a crazy list. I did my top 10 teams. We have all 32 teams ranked in today's episode, along with the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. I could get really into the nitty gritty with the quarterbacks. If you guys want that, let me know in the comments. Should I rank all 32 quarterbacks coming up next week? It's actually really funny. I had a QB tier list based off their week one performances. I pretty much had that recorded and ready to go. I just never posted it because of the Monday night situation and the games and blah, blah, blah. Excuses. We're not doing that here. We're recording. So let's stop wasting any more of our time. Let's dive into these power rankings for week 5 of the NFL season with our teams. And so this is also kind of a baseline as I reveal it to our YouTube watchers. For our podcast listeners, I will give you the rankings in order in a sec. But this is kind of one baseline and also where I think these teams are in current day form, right? I think every team, if the team's above you, that means they probably beat you. And if you're above another team, that means you probably beat them. Simple power rankings. So if we start from the bottom at 32, going up, we have the Titans, Saints, Panthers, and Jets. And really with the Titans, Saints, and Panthers, I think all three of these teams are just bad fundamentally. I don't think there's a certain trade. I don't think there's really anything that they could change to maybe have a spark, right? Maybe, you could say, the Saints just changed their quarterback from Spencer Rattler. He hasn't actually been playing terrible, right? He hasn't been playing great. I think he's 0-10 in the NFL with his starts, and that's obviously area for debate in terms of, okay, this guy's not a winner, why is he in the league? But the Saints have been playing close games, ethical tanking, as people would like to call it. And then you have the Titans. They are coming off a really bad loss this week and against the Texans. And for them, it's really just like, okay, where do we reset? Maybe firing their coach. Brian Callahan is the first way because a lot of people are kind of grading him poorly on his coaching decisions in terms of knowing the rules and whatnot. I would say that's very unfortunate from a head coaching perspective, and I think that's maybe the key for them to flip it around. And then for the Panthers, I was high on the Panthers this year. I had them winning a couple more games than they're currently on pace for, but that's just not the case. That's just not happening. And for Bryce Young and these Panthers, I just think, I think they're 30th right now. I think they would lose to a lot of teams if they were to play tomorrow. And then we have the Jets, Browns, Bengals, 29-27. These teams all kind of suffer from the same thing. The Jets might actually be better than both these teams, but for right now, what I saw on Monday night was their chance to win a game against the Dolphins. And they just completely crapped the bed. It was just unacceptable performance from the Jets. They're 0-4. Aaron Glenn is now getting some heat out there in New York, or in Jersey, I should say. And so for them, it's like, okay, they're a talented team. They have talent, but does that translate to wins? We'll have to see this upcoming week. And then we have the Browns. Browns just made the QB switch from Joe Flacco to Dylan Gabriel. Their defense is insane, right? They're actually, I would say this team is very similar to another team on this list that I'll get to in a sec. But for them making the QB change, I think that's the right move. Joe Flacco has been awful. He's been terrible to watch, especially when his defense has been playing great games after great games. Obviously against Detroit. Detroit's a different story. But for the Browns, you just have to have like an average offense to have a really good team. And then you have the Bengals and the Dolphins. For the Bengals, the Joe Burrow injury is obviously affecting them. They should probably be lower after that abysmal performance against the Broncos. But I still regard them highly. This is the last week, though. If they lose this week, and it's bad, we're going to have some words with Zach Taylor, with Jamar Chase. Like, where are you guys at? Where are you guys producing? For the Dolphins get the first victory on Monday. go to 1-3 on the season. They beat the Jets team, like I mentioned. Tyreek Hill, though, however, went down with a gruesome injury. He's down for the year. And so for them, it's like, okay, Jalen Waddle, you step up. Darren Waller. Did I say Darren Waller? Jalen Waddle, step up. Darren Waller looked pretty nice coming out of retirement for Miami. So for them, it's like, okay, this isn't the year because Tyreek Hill was your X factor on offense. And that pick I had them going to the playoffs is going to age terribly. Is going to age so badly. However, for them, I still like their offensive pieces, and their defense is pretty average, right? We're still just in the bad tier for teams. And another bad team is the Texans as we round off this first column at 25. The Houston Texans, their offense has just been so disappointing this year. I don't care about wide receiver health. Your quarterback, a top 10 or top 5 self-proclaimed quarterback, CJ Stroud, completely crapping the bed. They had a great week this week against the Titans, but it's the Titans. They're the last team in the NFL right now as it stands. And so for CJ Stroud in this Texans offense, maybe they trade for a wide receiver. Maybe they, experiment some other things. Maybe they wait for Joe Mixon to get back. But for right now, the Texans offense is bad and their defense isn't really helping them. They're kind of maybe the best out of the bad teams. And that's where we'll end off that bad teams kind of category. As we get through the 24 to 17 range, these are like decent teams, right? They're not anything crazy, but they can go in and they can win a game on Sunday if they play the right team. And they could potentially beat some of the really great teams if they play up to better than their expectation in that sense. So in order, we have the Raiders, Giants, and Commanders. The Giants, probably the more flashy team out of these three right now, just because they switched to Jackson Dart, got their first win against a Chargers team that a lot of people were saying this is a top 3, top 2 team in the NFL. Didn't translate to it. The Chargers didn't show up, at least this week, in New York. And the Giants took full advantage. They felt like they had a little bit more of a spark on offense. Obviously, the Malik Neighbors situation is why they're as low as they are right now. I think that's going to hurt them more long-term this season rather than instantly, if that makes sense. Well, what I mean is in the prospect of ranking them above teams. I think it'll hurt them like this upcoming week. And obviously long-term, especially for Jackson Dart, he feels like he could really use an excellent wide receiver talent, and the Giants just lost that, which is unfortunate. But they're above the Raiders. The Raiders with Geno Smith, and that's question marks at the quarterback position. You want to, for them, it's not, you don't really have another choice though. But Ashton Jeanty looked absolutely elite. 3 touchdowns on the day against the Bears defense, which is a bad rush defense. However, he was able to take advantage, and for that reason, I'm like, okay, they can run the ball. And then they have a guy like Max Crosby on the defensive side that can make some plays and potentially get a turnover or two. Those are qualities of great teams. Now, again, they're lacking in the other areas of the team, offensive line, defensive secondary, right? So there's areas for the Raiders where they can improve, but they have big pieces figured out. And running back, defensive playmaker, the quarterback's now a question mark, right? That wasn't necessarily a question mark for Raiders fans going into the season, but that is now the case, as I believe he leads the league in interceptions, with 7. Yikes. Especially with how your defense isn't the best defense in the league, you're kind of just, it feels like you're really sacrificing them as a whole. So for the Raiders, they're at 24. 21 to 17, we have the Patriots, Cardinals, Baltimore Ravens, Dallas Cowboys, and Denver Broncos. Now, this Baltimore, if you're watching this, you're like, Baltimore Ravens at 19, what is this guy smoking? Well, they're without Lamar Jackson for the next 2 weeks. They have one of the worst defenses in the entire NFL. Derrick Henry can't seem to remember to hold on to the football. This team has made mistakes, and they haven't really looked good outside of truly week 1 against the Bills. That offense looked really good. Their defense obviously has major problems. They lead the league in most points scored against at 33.3 or 30.3. Now it's very close to the Cowboys, which I have the Cowboys actually above the Ravens because it's, and I can actually trust this offense a little bit more. Their quarterback's playing better. Their running back is potentially playing a little bit better. They have the better wide receiver even without CeeDee Lamb right now and George Pickens. And so if you're comparing those two teams head to head, I could very well see the Cowboys winning that matchup. Maybe even with or without Lamar. Now, again, I say that and I'm like, okay, these are both terrible defenses, and we just saw the Cowboys tie a game in which their offense pretty much almost played flawless there in the second half. So before I get ahead of myself, before I look like a little bit of a homer with the Cowboys at 18, I do think they would fall in a game to the Denver Broncos. Very solid defense, average offense. This is like your average team. It feels like they could go 8-9, maybe 7-10. Their offense really needs to pick it up, though. Now, again, they just had a dominant performance offensively against the Bengals, but it still felt like they're missing some stuff. They just had their first 100-yard rusher under Sean Payton as the Denver Broncos head coach in J.K. Dobbins. That will be something potentially to monitor, how he kind of develops as that lead back. R.J. Harvey seems to be getting more in the groove. He screwed me over in fantasy this week. That's a little bit disheartening. That really killed my vibe on Monday, but the Broncos got the win. And they're kind of at the top of this mediocre tier. But then that translates into our solid team tier, 16-9. We have the Vikings, Bears, 49ers, Seahawks, Jags, Steelers, Falcons, and Colts at the top at 9 there. So some of the more controversial teams in this tier would, one, have to be the Minnesota Vikings, right? J.J. McCarthy goes down. Carson Wentz isn't playing the best ball. And they beat the Bears. So how are they below the Bears? Well, I think the Bears, for one, offensively, have sort of gotten to a little bit of a groove. Obviously, playing the Cowboys and playing the Raiders can kind of help that. But I think Caleb Williams is getting really comfortable at least. And I trust their quarterback more than I trust the Vikings quarterback at the end of the day right now. The Bears have problems on defense, especially with their run defense. But if they run into a team that struggles to run the ball, it kind of, negates that a little bit. And so for the Bears, they have, a tough road ahead, but I think there'll be somewhat around the 15 to 19, 20-ish tiers or placements as we get further down the season. I think this could probably be their peak in terms of my rankings. But this is a tier where a lot of fluidity can happen. With the Seahawks, Jags, and Steelers, I see all these teams having the potential. With the Falcons and the Colts, all these teams could potentially go lower. I could see them even going a little bit higher. Right? The Steelers get a great win in international game in Dublin. I was trying to think of where it was. Aaron Rodgers goes off, looks like his former self. Steelers are a very scary team now. They're 3-1. They lead the AFC North. It's kind of worse. Well, I would say for them, it's also, look at the situation they're in. Bengals, Joe Burrow's out for majority of the year, if not all the year. Lamar Jackson's now out for 3 to 4 weeks. The Browns still don't know who their starting quarterback is, right? So for the Steelers, not only do you win the games, that you have to win, but you're looking good while doing it. So for the Steelers at 11, I do think they'll beat teams like the Jags and the Seahawks, even though both those teams are very good teams. They have quality wins. The Jags just beat the 49ers, which are at 14. And so but the thing is, you're the 49ers beat the Seahawks. And I'm like, that is true. But now if they were to face off again, I think I'd take the Seahawks. Brock Purdy did not look good in his return this week against the Jags. He did not, right? And now if it's an injury that lingers or not, maybe he's his or he goes back to his, Brock Purdy play next week. That's why it's power rankings. It's fluidity, right? Do I take into account head-to-head? Absolutely. But I'm also if it's a really close game, then it's a coin flip. Which quarterback do I like more in terms of a winner-go-home type game? And then you have the Falcons and Colts. The Colts just suffered their first loss of the season to the Rams in a really close game that we'll dive into a little bit later, as the Rams are at 8 in the separate tier, though, if I had to categorize these in 4 tiers. And so for the Falcons and the Colts, both these teams have young quarterbacks. I know Daniel Jones is not necessarily super young, at least to the same level of Michael Penix. However, the Colts are playing great ball, right? They did lose. They were, a fumble out of the end zone from potentially winning that game by Adonai Mitchell. And so for the Colts, I'm I don't want to be too harsh on them for losing a game, right? Especially against another top 10 team in the NFL, especially on the road as well. So for these teams, my main question mark is the longevity of their quarterback performing well. We just saw the Falcons a couple weeks ago get shut out by the Panthers. But then last week, they come back and they looked great, right? Colts, can they keep up this, high-quality performances one after another, right? Or do they stumble because they lost a game? We'll have to see. For those teams, these easily could be top 5 teams at some point this season. But it's really a test of where these teams are. Now let's get into our top 8 teams, I should say, in the NFL. Starting at 8, We have the Los Angeles Rams at 7, the Los Angeles Chargers 6, Green Bay Packers 5, Tampa Bay Bucks 4, Buffalo Bills 3, Detroit Lions 2, Kansas City Chiefs, and 1, the Philadelphia Eagles. And so if we start at the bottom there, back with the LA teams, I think these teams are both evenly matched if you were to put them in a matchup. The Chargers, if they won this week, they probably would be top 2, maybe even top 1. But they lost, and they lost to a Giants team that lost their best wide receiver, best offensive player halfway through the game. And so for them, I'm like, okay, how much can you really trust this Chargers team? Because they have the talent. Quarterback plays playing well. It seems like they have a breakout wide receiver in Quentin Johnson having a great year, a great start to the year. Defense, you have the playmakers. The Khalil Mack injury is definitely something to monitor. When is he going to come back? He seems to be a pretty important piece as the Giants were able to really move the ball on the Chargers. And so this could be the start of a downfall for them in terms of power rankings. And so for right now, 7 seems fine. Maybe a little egregious. Maybe it should be a little lower. But for right now, I think the teams above them would win in the game, just off what I saw against the Giants. Now for the Rams, solid team. They beat a good Colts team, but they did choke a game against the Eagles. Now that was brought to you by a blocked kick. Should the Rams be higher? Potentially. But for them, I really want to see them beat an elite team. Now, maybe that's the Bucks, Packers. I just want to see it. And if that's the case, they could easily move into the top 3. Then you have the Green Bay Packers and the Tampa Bay Bucks. The more I think about it, maybe I'm like, the Packers would probably win a head-to-head matchup if it was now. But the Packers defense looked terrible. Now, again, Dak Prescott played out of his mind, and I could rave all about that because that was a very MVP-worthy performance from Dak, especially without their number 1 wide receiver. But for the Packers' perspective, that was an unacceptable performance in a game that everyone was saying you're going to dominate. Right now, maybe the noise got to them a little bit, but this Packers defense throughout the first 3 weeks looked really sharp. Right? Shut down the Lions in week 1. And then a couple weeks later, they shut down the Browns. And you're like, okay, sweet, we're cooking. But then you get a 40 bomb dropped on you by the Cowboys in overtime. And it forces a tie. And it seems like a lot of people are actually being really hard on the Packers right now. And deservedly so. However, pump the brakes. A lot of people are having good takes on this. For the Packers, slow it down. They'll be fine. But the Micah Parsons situation is interesting with an injury. We'll keep an eye on that. For the Bucks, I predicted Baker Mayfield win the MVP this year. 2 weeks ago, they had a chance to beat the Eagles, the number 1 team in this power rankings. They fell short. They almost had a chance. So I think for them, they're still on that precipice of being really elite. They did miss Mike Evans this week, but they still seem to ready the ship a little bit. But for the Tampa Bay Bucks, I really like this offense. It's really just going to be, is the defense going to be one of those top units in the NFL? I believe they have the ability to do so. Same thing with the Buffalo Bills. I like the offense. I don't love the playmakers they have. I don't feel like they're super proven. However, the defense, quarterback, everything there works for the Bills. But the Lions just do it a little bit better, right? And that's why the Lions are at 3. Bad week 1, but since then, they've looked very sharp. Same thing with the Chiefs. The Chiefs started off a little cold, right? They were fearing a 1-3 start, which would have been bad, but they get Xavier Worthy back. They get a little bit more healthy on the offensive side of the ball, and look what happens. They destroy a Ravens team with a bad defense, right? The Chiefs' offense looked very solid. Mahomes played well. We'll get into that in the QB rankings. And then you have the Eagles, not the flashiest of teams, but they're winning games, right? I believe them and the Bills are the only undefeated teams, but for a lot of reasons, that's why I have the Bills so low. But the Eagles, they find a way to win games. They find a way to win close games. And if you're like, okay, if any of these teams are in close games, which one would be more likely to win? It's the Eagles. And for that reason, I have the Eagles at my number 1 spot in this Week 5 power rankings. However, if they were to lose a game, they could I want to say they could fall. But I'm like, look at it, I'm like, well, they'll probably lose a game close. Right? Out of all these teams, maybe them, the Chiefs, and the Bills would lose close. I don't see them getting blown out anytime this next half of, or this next 3/4 of the season. That's why I believe the Eagles are actually a really good team, and it's unfortunate because I'm a Cowboys fan. But that'll do it for this Week 5 power rankings. Let me know what you guys' thoughts in the comments below. What's a bad take? What's a good take? I believe my best take is probably the Ravens. I think that's an underrated take. A lot of people are maybe ranking them in the 10 to 16 range. I think they're not that good of a team. And then one of my weakest takes, I would say, would probably be where, but then you get the Nick Bosa. I'm thinking like 49ers. I think my weakest take would probably be, I don't know if there's a weak take. Like, I believe in all of this. I would say maybe the Falcons are a little high. 2 weeks ago, they literally got shut out and looked bad against the 30th team on my list. So maybe the Falcons are a little high. That would probably be my weakest take, and something I'm definitely monitoring towards next week. And so as we take a little bit of a break here, as I drink some water, and we're going to transition into our QB rankings here in a second, I want to let you guys know on a little bit of an update for what I'm doing with this podcast and this channel for the next couple of weeks as I can try to do it. So I am going to try to post 3 times a day. Or no, 3 times a week. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, what the original plan for this podcast was. And I think I was lacking a little bit of structure, and so I figured it out. Mondays is going to be more of a reaction episode. I'll try to go through every single game possible and maybe give my quick thoughts, because I try and watch every game possible. So Monday's more of a reaction day. Then Wednesday's a day like today where I'm ranking these teams, comparing these teams, the outlooks for these teams. And then Friday's more of a prediction day, right? So on Friday, you can, look in your YouTube subscription box or look on Apple Podcasts or Spotify Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast, and you're like, okay, what is Jackson thinking this weekend for this NFL slate? That is right now what I'm going to be doing. Let me know your guys' thoughts on that layout in the comments below. Do you guys think that's good? What else would you like me to include? I will say I do want to cover, my heart is I want to cover NBA, but I'm I got to focus on NFL because the NFL is a good niche to really grow in. And I know a lot about football, more than I know about basketball, but I might have to sprinkle a little bit of the Mavs basketball here or there just because I love talking about them. We had the first day of training camp the other day. It's awesome. It looks great. I'm excited for Mavs basketball. I'll say it. So let me know your guys' thoughts on that layout down below. But now it's time to get into these quarterback rankings. So it's only my top 10 quarterbacks. And so bear with, not every quarterback will make this list. And I think that's important because you got to pick the best of the best. Now, so what is my criteria for this list? Well, first off, it's performance, right? It's how well you play. It's not necessarily winning. It's okay, did you play well? Did you protect the ball, right? Did you make winning plays rather than losing plays? That's a big thing for me. Then it's the style of your winning. Or not your winning, sorry, the style of your play. Are you taking deep shots? Are you really cutting up defenses, right? That's how I'm looking at this. I'm they're doing a lot. And then it's the weight of your performance, right? Oh, in Mahomes' situation this past week, he played very well, and he's a reason why they blew out the Ravens. But let's say it's an average game where it's oh, we blew them out, and they're a bad team, right? It would be like the Eagles blowing out, Tennessee, and Jalen Hurts throws for 4 touchdowns, right? He cut them up. He had the stats. He made winning plays, but the weight of that wasn't necessarily super massive because it's the Titans. Whereas his performance against the Chiefs actually would be weighted a little bit higher because it's against a much better quality opponent. And then finally, you could say, did they win? Did they lose? That can definitely play a little bit into it, especially with the opponent they beat, going back to that last point. So let's dive into my top 10 as I messed this up. Here we go. My top 10 quarterbacks going into week 5. Now, again, this isn't quarterbacks I would take, to start a franchise with. This is going into week 5, right? So for our podcast listeners, I'll say it from 10 to 9 at our top spot. So at number 10, I have Jordan Love. Jordan Love, is coming off a great performance against the Cowboys. He did have a costly penalty that really shifted that game. However, I think the Packers scored on every single drive in the second half and in overtime. He looked locked in. I really had high hopes going in this season for Jordan Love. Obviously coming off a very disappointing Cleveland Browns performance for him. But I still think when I looked at the rest of the quarterbacks on this list, he definitely deserved to make it on this list, especially coming off a great performance like he had against the Cowboys defense. Now, it's not necessarily super flex because everyone does well against the Cowboys defense. However, I kind of have to take the entire picture of the season to include him in this list. Same thing with Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones and Jordan Love are kind of similar quarterbacks this season in terms of what they produced. Both teams heading into today were, the Packers were 3-0. The Colts were also 3-0 heading into week 4. One walked away with a tie, one walked away with a loss, and both had pretty bad plays to lose the game. Now, Daniel Jones, for instance, he played very well, similar to Jordan Love, but he had his mistake interception at the end that really cost him. It didn't really cost him the game, but lost him the game. Jordan Love had that fumble. Now, again, that's niche. I'm being super niche. This is a top 10 list. I have to pick and choose with each player. But for the Colts, they were on the road, and I think Daniel Jones played very well. When you look at the season, I believe he is third in passing yards. When you look at touchdowns, he is, where is he? Oh, he's actually pretty down there. He only has 4 compared to Jordan Love's 8. But when you look at the interceptions, he only has 2 on the season, which is really, really good. Now, again, maybe I should put Jordan Love above Daniel Jones, but I really like how this Colts team is running. He's looked very good. Deep ball accuracy has been there. Like, Daniel Jones has been playing well. Maybe it's a little bit of my bias on the Cowboys defense being bad. Maybe Jordan Love should be above Daniel Jones, but for right now, Daniel Jones is a top 10 quarterback heading into week 4. Crazy. Then you have Jalen Hurts, and this goes into the flashiness of winning. When I'm looking at, Jalen Hurts' stats this season, he's not asking to do too much, and I don't think you can have that against him. He's completing 69% of his passes. He has no interceptions so far in the season, 5 touchdown passes. I mean, the guy's been playing pretty clean football, 100.1, 0.5 quarterback rating. He's been playing well. His team's undefeated. But for him, it's just like this offense, I believe they had no yardage in the second half. Excuse me, what? Like that, what? And so for that, I think the guys above him are playing better football than Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is playing winning football, which is the key, to football. Do you win these games? But if we're taking these quarterbacks at their single position, I believe he is the 8th quarterback heading into week 5. Then we have Sam Darnold and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson should have probably taken a little bit more of a dip. Sam Darnold, however, has been balling. Completed 70% of his passes, 5 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, a 106 quarterback rating. And he's played really well. Whereas Lamar had a great week 1 against the Bills, like a great number 1 spot, potentially heading into week 2 at that point. But since then, he's now injured. He probably won't make the list next week just because of the injury. I'm trying to list active quarterbacks. And so that's a big thought. And he also just looked bad against the Chiefs. And so for that reason, he's at number 6. At number 5, we have Patrick Mahomes. Should be a little bit higher based off his recent performance. However, if you take the whole season as a whole, looked okay against the Giants. And so looked okay against the Chiefs. But I think 5 is where he should be right now. You could make the argument he should be above Herbert for recency bias in terms of recent performances. 1 blew out a top team, 1 lost to the Giants, right? So you could make the comparison there. But I like Justin Herbert's whole resume so far this season. Then you get to my top 3 quarterbacks. So at number 3, we have Matt Stafford. At number 2, we have Josh Allen. And at number 1, we have Dak Prescott. Now, do I think Dak Prescott is an inherently better quarterback than Josh Allen? I would be lying if I said yes. I love watching Dak Prescott play. He's a very underrated quarterback in the NFL. But we'll get to that in a second. Matthew Stafford is another quarterback that's been playing a pretty good ball. 1,100 yards so far through the air this season. He's averaging 8.2 yards per completion. He's averaging 278 yards per game. 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. The dude's been playing very well. 106 quarterback rating. He's played very well. Very well. And so he's at number 3. Like, it's nitpicky at this point. I look at who Matt Stafford's playing and I look at his team as a whole. He's a great wide receiver playmaker. Puka Nacua is on, an all-pro track right now on how he's playing. He is a great running back in Kyren Williams. Devontae Adams looks like a great fit out there in LA. For Matthew Stafford, I think he has all the pieces, and he has a great defense that can leave a little bit of room for error for them. So that's why Matt Stafford's at 2. Josh Allen is at 2, Matt Stafford's at 3, Josh Allen at 2, because of, I believe, he has a very lackluster roster around him offensively. And he kind of supersedes that. Like, he does a little bit of Superman and kind of lifts them. Outside of James Cook, I think this is, kind of a below, I would say it's an average offense. Dalton Kincaid seems to be a little bit of a bright spot so far, 4 games into the season. But for Josh Allen, he's a solid quarterback. I mean, we can take a look at his stats. Completing 70% of his passes, 964 yards, 7 touchdowns to 1 interception so far, a 109 quarterback rating. I mean, the guy has been insane. He's played very well, and he's a reason why he's one of the last 2 quarterbacks with an undefeated record so far this season. And then at number 1, we have Dak Prescott. Now look, could this be a biased take? Absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. But if you take a look at Dak Prescott's stats, completing 73% of his passes, 1,100 yards so far this season, only 6 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, lower compared to the other guys, and has a 95 quarterback rate, or has a passer rating. And so you look at these stats and you're like, okay, this guy's not been playing good ball compared to the other guys stat-wise, if you're box score watching. However, if you look at the season as a whole, played well enough for them to beat the Eagles. They didn't do it because their defense was trash. Almost lost week 2 against the Giants, in which a game he dropped 37 points. They almost lost that game because their defense is trash. The Bears game, he didn't play well. He straight up didn't play well. But he also lost his main target on the first play of the game pretty much. Right now, again, I'm not using that as an excuse, but I'm like, okay, he played well. He didn't play well against the Bears. He didn't. But then he followed up with an absolute stellar performance against a top 5 defense, right, heading into the game. Maybe the best defense in the NFL heading in. And he looked unstoppable. Unstoppable without his best wide receiver. Without his 2 starting linemen. He went out there and balled out. It was insane. It is such an underrated performance by Dak Prescott, because of what he was missing. And it's been an entire trope through his entire career. If he doesn't have the pieces in place, he won't play well. Right? Now, again, he had George Pickens. George Pickens is a wide receiver 1 for a lot of teams, right? George Pickens played out of his mind. He had players step up. Javonte Williams had a good game, right? Jalen Tolbert had insane catch after insane catch. He played well. But Dak Prescott should get a lot of credit heading into this next week based off his performance against the Packers. The game would have been a blowout against the Giants, against the Packers. The Bears game would have gotten a lot uglier, and they wouldn't have a chance in hell against the Eagles week 1 if it wasn't for how Dak Prescott's playing so far this season. And maybe it's the standards, right? Maybe we hold Josh Allen, Matthew Stafford, Mahomes to a higher standard, Lamar to a higher standard than we do guys like Dak, like guys like Jalen Hurts, like guys like Jordan Love. And maybe that's the case with this ranking. However, I will stand 10 toes down that Dak Prescott is playing the quarterback position better than anyone in the NFL. Yes, he's made mistakes. He's made more mistakes than others. However, I think he has to carry a lot more of the load than all these quarterbacks on this list combined, just because based off how bad their defense is. Watch a Cowboys defense play. If we all saw that game on Sunday night, they couldn't stop anybody. Dak Prescott scored with 40 seconds left, and the defense just let him get in an easy field goal range at the end of the game. Like, he would have had the play of the week against the Packers if when George Pickens scored that touchdown, that was the game. However, their defense sucks so bad that they were able to go into overtime, right? And he almost had the game-winning touchdown, but Micah Parsons made that tackle right behind him. So, Dak is only a couple plays. CeeDee Lamb's drop, the tackle by Micah, right, from potentially being 2-1-1 on the season. Or 3-1 on the season. And we'd be looking at him a lot differently so far. But he hasn't played. He played bad one game, obviously cost him. Like, that is what I'm talking about. If he were to play bad every single game or not play up to his standard, the Cowboys would get smoked in every game. But out of the 3 out of the 4 games so far have been close because Dak Prescott's playing so well. And he easily has maybe one of the worst teams on this list, right? Outside of the Baltimore Ravens and Lamar. Just because based so far off this regular season. So that's my Dak Prescott rant. Maybe controversial if you're not a Cowboys fan, but I'm telling you, he's a dog. He's a dog for real. So let me know your thoughts on these quarterback rankings. Who didn't make the list? I know some honorable mentions I had on this list were Trevor Lawrence, Drake May, Jared Goff. Jared Goff probably should be on this list the more I think about it. But it's probably over Daniel Jones. I mean, Jared Goff has 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. It's 3-1, but I digress. Yeah, I think that's good though on the honorable mention quarterbacks. Yeah. Maybe I should do a not top 10 next week because that would be an much easier list to make. So anyways, that'll do it for this quarterback rankings and this episode as a whole. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to try to get this uploaded ASAP for you guys right after this because I think it is early afternoon. I want to get this out before the evening so you guys can watch it before dinner. Anyways, thank you guys for joining me for another episode of You Don't Know Jack. I'm Jackson James. I'll see you guys again on Friday for my Week 5 outlook, and I'll give you my picks for every single NFL game. Anyways, appreciate you guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or the follow button, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.